Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes. Today, we're diving deep
Oh, yeah.
into the world of commerce and colonialism with the East India Company, the world's most powerful corporation by Tirthankar Roy.
Wow.
This book
Yeah.
really unpacks how a company, starting as a humble trading venture, grew to have such a massive impact on the world.
It's remarkable, isn't it? The East India Company, or EIC as we'll call it,
Hmm?
often brings to mind images of tea clippers and exotic spices, but
Ah,
its story goes far beyond that. Roy's book dives into the company's complex legacy, exploring its revolutionary corporate structure, its impact on India and England, and the factors that ultimately led to its downfall.
exactly, we'll follow its journey. From its beginnings in the spice trade, through its acquisition of political and military power, all the way to its decline in the face of competition and changing political tides. So,
Yeah.
let's set sail, shall we? The story begins in the 16th century, a time when Portugal held a tight grip on the spice trade. European nations were eager to find a way in. And in England, that ambition led to the formation of the East India Company.
It was a bold move, really. Roy argues that the very structure of the EIC as a joint stock company was key to its success, by allowing individuals to pool their resources and share both profits and losses. The EIC could take on risks that were simply too great for individual merchants. This innovative model, as he points out, laid the groundwork for the way many modern corporations operate today.
That's a fascinating point. It's not just about tea and spices. It's about the birth of a new way of doing business. The book details some of the EIC's early voyages, highlighting the expeditions of figures like Ralph Fitch and James Lancaster. Imagine the audacity it took to embark on these journeys in the late 1500s, facing treacherous seas and unknown lands.
Absolutely. Their voyages, fraught with peril and uncertainty, provided valuable knowledge about the East. They were pioneers, not just in trade, but in exploration, gathering information that would fuel further interest and investment in the region.
Gaining a foothold in India wasn't easy, was it? The EIC faced stiff competition from other European powers and had to navigate the complexities of the Mughal court.
True. The book highlights the diplomatic missions of William Hawkins and William Mildenhall to the Mughal Emperor Akbar, each trying to secure trading rights. Their experiences reveal the delicate dance of diplomacy and the challenges of establishing a presence in a foreign land.
And then enters Sir Thomas Roe, ambassador to Jahangir's court, who really seems to have cracked the code.
Roe was a shrewd diplomat. Through persistence and skillful negotiation, he secured a royal license to trade, a critical turning point that gave the EIC a legitimate presence in India. It's a testament to the power of diplomacy and the importance of understanding the cultural nuances of the region. So,
The EIC sets up shop. But they didn't just stick to trading, did they? They began acquiring territory, transforming from a merchant company into a power player on the Indian subcontinent.
right. Roy argues that this shift was driven by several factors, including competition with the Dutch and the ambitions of key figures within the company like Gerald Ongear and Sir John Child. These individuals saw the potential for not just controlling trade routes, but also controlling land and resources.
And they weren't afraid to get their hands dirty. The book recounts the acquisition of Madras and Calcutta, highlighting the roles of colorful personalities like Francis Day and Job Charnock.
The story of Calcutta's founding is particularly intriguing. Job Charnock, as the book describes, was a man of determination and resourcefulness. He navigated the complexities of local politics and eventually established a trading post that would grow into a major center of EIC power.
So, we're already starting to see the seeds of an empire being sown. It wasn't just about spices anymore. It was about control, influence, and the consolidation of power.
But this transition wasn't without its bumps in the road. The EIC faced internal conflicts, like the clash between Josiah Child and those challenging the company's monopoly.
This was the issue of private trade, right? Individuals operating outside the EIC's regulations. I remember Roy describing them as interlopers, almost like rebels challenging the established order. It really undermined the company's control and profits.
Exactly. It highlighted a key tension within the company, the desire for control versus the entrepreneurial spirit of those seeking to profit from the booming trade with India.
And then there were external threats as well. The Indian Ocean was rife with pirates, posing a real danger to the EIC's ships and its precious cargo.
The book dedicates an entire chapter to this threat, even discussing the infamous Captain Kidd, whose story seems straight out of a pirate movie. He began as a privateer hired by the EIC, but later turned to piracy, becoming a symbol of the lawlessness that plagued the seas.
It's a reminder that the EIC operated in a world where danger lurked everywhere, from rival powers to opportunists like Kidd, it adds a layer of intrigue to their story, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It shows that building a global empire wasn't just about boardroom decisions. It was about navigating a complex web of challenges and threats, both on land and at sea. And while these external dramas unfolded back in England, the impact of the EIC's activities was being felt in a very different way.
You're talking about the consumer revolution, right? The influx of goods from the East transformed English society and its tastes.
Precisely. Suddenly, everyday people had access to exotic fabrics, like Indian cotton, spices that added new flavors to their meals, and other goods that were once only available to the wealthy. Roy argues that this consumer boom had a profound impact on English society, driving demand for new products and contributing to the growth of industries like textiles and manufacturing.
It's amazing how a company founded to trade spices could have such a wide-reaching impact on the culture and economy back home.
It speaks to the power of globalization, even in its early forms. And it's a reminder that the choices we make as individuals and societies have ripple effects that extend far beyond our immediate surroundings.
Roy also makes a fascinating point about the role of trust in the EIC's early success.
Yes, he argues that trust, rather than formal contracts or legal enforcement, was crucial in those initial stages.
Because they were operating in a world where information traveled slowly and relationships were paramount.
Right. The EIC built trust with Indian merchants and agents, often relying on their word and reputation, rather than legally binding agreements. This approach, while unconventional, proved remarkably effective in the early days.
But as the EIC grew in size and power, maintaining that level of trust became more difficult, didn't it?
Exactly. The increasing scale of operations, coupled with the distance between the company's headquarters in London and its outposts in India, made it harder to cultivate those personal connections that were so vital in the early days.
And that breakdown in trust is reflected in the rise of private trade and the conflicts between the EIC and his own employees, right?
Precisely. It's almost as if the company's own success, its growth and ambition, sowed the seeds of distrust and eventually decline.
Now, one of the most striking passages in the book is Roy's description of the financial transformation that occurred in London due to the EIC's activities.
Oh, absolutely. He talks about how the influx of capital from the East led to the development of new financial institutions, like the Bank of England, and spurred the growth of London's financial markets. It's a clear example of how the EIC's influence extended far beyond the realm of trade, shaping the very foundations of modern finance.
It's a point that often gets overlooked, but it's a crucial part of the EIC's legacy. The book also delves into the EIC's increasing involvement in Indian politics and warfare, especially in the 18th century.
This period marked a turning point for the company, wouldn't you say? They transitioned from primarily a trading entity to a major political and military force. The book highlights figures like Joseph Dupleix and Robert Clive, key players in the rivalry between the British and the French for control of India.
And the Battle of Plassey, a decisive victory for the British under Clive's command, really cemented the EIC's dominance in Bengal.
Yes, Plassey was a pivotal moment. It shifted the balance of power in the region and allowed the EIC to expand its territorial control significantly. But it also marked a shift in the company's role. They were no longer just traders, they were rulers, administrators, and military commanders.
But that increased power also brought greater responsibility and scrutiny, didn't it?
Absolutely. Roy doesn't shy away from discussing the darker aspects of the EIC's rule. He highlights instances of corruption, mismanagement, and the exploitation of resources. He describes how the company's pursuit of profit often came at the expense of the Indian people and their traditional ways of life.
He even introduces this concept called the East India Company Syndrome.
Yes, it's a fascinating concept. Roy uses it to describe the lingering distrust that some in India still feel towards foreign companies, a legacy of the EIC's exploitative practices during the colonial era.
It's like a historical hangover,
Yeah.
shaping perceptions and attitudes toward international trade even today.
Precisely. It shows that the impact of colonialism extends far beyond the political and economic realms. It shapes cultural perspectives and attitudes for generations.
Makes you wonder about the long-term consequences of actions, both on a personal and societal level. The choices we made today will undoubtedly have ripple effects that we may not even be able to fully grasp.
That's a profound point. The EIC's story serves as a cautionary tale, reminding us to consider the broader implications of our actions and to strive for ethical and sustainable practices in all our endeavors.
Speaking of ethics, The book also touches upon the growing criticism of the EIC back in England.
Yes, towards the end of the 18th century, figures like Adam Smith began to challenge the very concept of a chartered monopoly, arguing that it stifled competition and ultimately harmed the interests of consumers.
Smith, considered the father of modern economics, believed in the power of free markets, and argued that the EIC's monopoly hindered economic growth and innovation. His critiques reflected a changing tide of public opinion, a growing sense that the company had become too powerful and unaccountable.
And this shift in public sentiment, coupled with the company's own internal problems and the changing political landscape, ultimately led to its downfall.
The book concludes with the dissolution of the EIC in 1858, marking the end of an era. It's almost like witnessing the fall of an empire, isn't it?
It is, in a way. The EIC's story is a reminder that even the most powerful institutions are not immune to decline. It's a story about the complexities of power, the allure and dangers of ambition, and the enduring consequences of choices made, both individually and collectively.
It really makes you think about the impact corporations can have, not just on economics, but on societies, and even on the course of history itself.
Absolutely. The EIC's legacy is complex and multifaceted. Roy argues that it's impossible to separate the company's economic achievements from the darker aspects of colonialism. He presents a nuanced view, acknowledging both the positive and negative aspects of the EIC's influence.
So, it's not a simple story of heroes and villains. They're shades of gray, and it's up to each of us to grapple with those complexities and draw our own conclusions.
Exactly. Roy provides the reader with a framework for understanding the EIC. But he doesn't offer easy answers. He challenges us to think critically about the past and to consider its implications for the present and the future.
And speaking of the present, one of the most fascinating things about this book is how it connects to modern-day issues.
It's remarkable how relevant the EIC's story feels even today. Issues like globalization, corporate power, and the legacy of colonialism are still very much a part of our world.
It makes you wonder if we've truly learned from the past, doesn't it?
That's a question worth pondering. I think Roy would argue that we have a responsibility to learn from history, to understand the mistakes that were made, and to strive for a more just and equitable world.
And what about the EIC's impact on India? How should we view that legacy today?
Well, as we discussed earlier, it's a complex legacy with both positive and negative aspects. The EIC brought about changes in infrastructure, technology, and even in some social practices, but it also exploited resources, disrupted traditional economies, and contributed to the political and economic subjugation of India.
It's a lot to unpack, and certainly not something that can be easily resolved.
True. But Roy's book provides a valuable starting point for these conversations. He encourages us to engage with the complexities of history and to consider multiple perspectives.
So, if someone were to ask us, what's the one key takeaway from this book? What would we say?
That's a tough one. But I think it would be that the story of the East India Company is not just about a company. It's about us. It's about the choices we make, the systems we create, and the impact we have on each other and on the world around us.
It's a reminder that history is not just something that happened in the past. It's something that continues to shape our present and will undoubtedly influence our future.
Exactly. The EIC story may have ended in 1858, but its echoes can still be felt today. It serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the power and peril of unchecked ambition, and a call to action to create a more just and equitable world.
Well, listeners, there you have it. A deep dive into the East India Company, the world's most powerful corporation, by Tirthankar Roy. It's a book that challenges us to think deeply about the past, present, and future, and to consider our role in shaping the world we live in.
We encourage you to pick up a copy and embark on your own journey of discovery. We guarantee it's a journey worth taking.
And as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts, what stood out to you in this deep dive. Share your questions and reflections in the comments below. We're always eager to hear from our listeners.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration of history and its relevance to our lives today. We'll see you next time on Books and Bytes.